Alex Caspero and Whitney English, thank you so much for joining us on the Plant Tuners podcast today.
Thanks for having us. It's a pleasure to chat with you guys.
We are excited to chat with both of you. We don't often do so many windows, so this is exciting for us. And before we begin, we always ask our guests what they are grateful for. So Whitney, why don't you tell us what you're grateful for today?
Okay, it's sort of a small moment, but this morning, well, my son is 3 and my daughter is 6 months, and it's been a little bit of a transition for him getting used to having another person in the house and sharing his things. And typically he's not all in that interested in letting her touch anything that's his. And this morning they were on the floor and he was playing with all of his things, and I was kind of watching him out of the side of my eye, and I hear him go, "Here you go, baby sister, you can have this one." Oh. And my heart just melted. So that's my moment of gratitude.
That is a beautiful moment, and here's to many, many more like that. When you model it, it comes.
That's really sweet.
And Alex?
Yeah, so I'm actually having a lot of gratitude right now for my husband. It's been a very busy few weeks just doing various book promo stuff, and he's really been kind of holding down the fort, doing a lot more parenting, a lot more cooking than he's used to. So I'm very grateful for his sort of overtaking some of the responsibilities at home right now, so I can do these things.
That's great. The support is everything.
Yeah. You got to let him know, right?
Yeah, well, he needs to listen, and then he'll know.
What an important lesson there. Two important lessons right there. There you go. So we'd also love to know how you found a plant-based lifestyle and what changed for you. So Alex, when did you first encounter a plant-based lifestyle?
Yeah, so, I always joke, I wish I had this really wonderful, inspiring story, and I do not. I sort of found it in college. Well, I'll also say I was never a big meat eater. So my dad is a big hunter, which really had the opposite effect on me growing up. I was really grossed out from a very early age, sort of where our food came from. I remember viscerally seeing deer in our garage and being completely grossed out by meat. So I didn't eat a lot of meat to begin with. And then in college, I was dating this bodybuilder. I call him a meathead because that's sort of, for lack of better terms, exactly what he was. Really obsessed with meat. He used to wake up in the middle of the night and drink milk and eat tuna out of cans. And it was just so revolting. Anyways, we broke up. And I was just done with it. I really kind of wanted to sort of break that identity that I had in that relationship. And a friend came over the morning that we broke up with coffee and then a copy of the Skinny Bitch book. And I read it in one setting and I was like, that's it. I'm done eating meat. And that was in 2006. And I haven't eaten meat since. And then from there sort of slowly evolved to really having my diet be predominantly plant-based. So 15 years or so ago is really kind of where my journey started. And I always say I haven't talked to him since that day, but wherever he is now, I am very thankful for being that catalyst and introducing me to a plant-based lifestyle.
Well, another moment of gratitude. I remember when I met Adam, he used to eat tuna out of the can as well. So maybe not in the middle of the night, and baked beans out of the can too.
Yeah.
So
it was that those are things that you do when you're trying to put on muscle and you don't know any better, right?
Exactly.
I've learned a lot since then, and there's a lot more information out now, and it's a lot more clear.
So your meathead might be a plant head by now. Who knows?
Maybe. I doubt it, but hopefully. Although I will say, my husband still eats baked beans out of a can, and I'm like, what are you doing? Heat those up. He just loves, he eats them still to this day. So
that's great. And yeah, Skinny Bitch was also the book that did it for me. It was don't be stupid. Use clean toothpaste and give up dairy. And I'm like, okay, I won't be stupid, girlfriend. And and that was it for me. And I'd gone through all the things, right? Forks Over Knives. I read China Study, but it was that book that really spoke to me as well. So yeah, thanks.
That tough love.
Exactly, tough love, but like a girlfriend talking to you and just telling it to you straight. So I think that really worked for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about you, Whitney?
Yeah, so my plant-based journey is a little more recent, I'd say in like the past 5 years, and it actually coincides with when I became a dietitian. I'm a second career dietitian. I got my start as an entertainment reporter in Los Angeles. I was always personally interested in nutrition and fitness, but I was totally sold on the whole high protein, high animal protein diet. I used to eat like 6 egg whites for breakfast every day, chicken at most meals. And it wasn't until I went back to school to become a dietitian and just so happened to take a course with one of the leading researchers in health span and longevity, Dr. Walter Longo, that I learned about the benefits of a plant-based diet. And it was literally on the first day of class when he did this information dump of all of the research on plant-based diets. And I was just shocked because I really hadn't heard it before. I thought plant-based eating was kind of fringe. I didn't think there was a lot of evidence to back it up. And I was confronted with this massive amount of research. And I jumped on board right then and haven't looked back since, and have been, predominantly plant-based for about, I guess, 5 years now since that course.
So my question is, how many other people in the class that you know of swayed the same way as you, or did it kind of just go over their head?
Some people it did. Some people just kind of picked and chose what parts they agreed with. But I would say that at least 75% of the class is in some form mostly plant-based, if not fully. It's interesting because in most dietetics programs, you're not going to get that information. It was just such a stroke of luck that I happened upon this specific course, because if I hadn't taken it in the rest of the program, we would have touched on plant-based nutrition, but I would have never probably learned the vast depth of research that's out there supporting it. And I may still be at least eating partially the way I used to. So I'm just so thankful for that happened to me.
Any noticeable changes that you've gone through since?
Yeah. So I always caveat this by saying, don't rely on anecdotal reports, but there is data, I think, suggesting that plant-based diets are beneficial for digestive health. Personally, I've suffered from IBS and GERD since I was like 13 years old. I was on proton pump inhibitors for many years, and it was after going plant-based, and I didn't initially notice it. It was like about a year or two in, I was like, oh, hey, all of my digestive symptoms have gotten better. Like, I'm okay. I got off the meds. And there were other lifestyle changes too, just getting older and probably treating my body a little bit better. But I would say that was I definitely think that was the main reason that they've gotten better.
That's great. And, just the anecdotal works so well in terms of just getting other people on board, right? The science might be there, but if they know that one person that it didn't work for them, that's what they're going to listen to. So the anecdotal is extremely powerful as well. Yes. And I think people need to give it a try for themselves and give it a try for long enough as well.
Yeah. When you can couple the science and the personal reports, I think that's the best way to really reach people.
Great. So you guys are celebrating that you've written Plant-Based Baby and Toddler, which is really exciting because we wish we had some kind of, we were saying before we started recording, some kind of guidance for our children 8 years ago when I think it's 9 years for Adam, 8 years for me that we're plant-based. So getting the children on board slightly after that. If we would have had somebody say, don't worry, they'll be okay. You're not going to screw them up by making them go plant-based. So you've come together, you've written this book. Let us know first how you guys found each other. What brought this match together?
Yeah, so Whitney and I actually met a little over a decade ago at a conference. We were both blogging. I was a dietitian. She was blogging about nutrition, and we just hit it off. We became friends, and we sort of stayed in touch ever since. And then we were pregnant-ish around the same time. So our children are about 7 months apart. So I think I had just had my son, and she was pregnant with hers. And we were just messaging each other, just asking various questions, sort of like you do when you're pregnant or you're a new mom. Hey, have you seen this study, or what do you think about this, or how have you thought about this at all? And we just felt like, oh my goodness, at this time we were both dietitians. if we're having all of these questions and not being able to find the answers really easily, a lot of other parents are likely going to be in the same boat and don't really have sort of the background to be able to rely on to understand studies and sort of what the recommendations are out there. So that's really the reason that we started Plant-Based Juniors, and that's also the reason that we wrote this book, the Plant-Based Baby and Toddler. It really was like, this is the book that we were looking for when we were pregnant. You know, I felt like when I was going out there and trying to find information on plant-based diets, either in pregnancy or even in, you know, early infancy, toddlerhood, I felt like the options out there were really outdated. So there was like one dietitian book that was about pregnancy, but it was a decade old, so it really wasn't as current as I wanted it to be. And then for babies and kids, you know, at that time, it really was sort of like a lot of pseudoscience. You know, it was sort of influencers or celebrities, and they were fine books, but they really weren't sort of rooted in what the actual evidence said. And, you know, Whitney and I really like to sort of comb through and say, you know, what does the science say? What is the evidence here? You know, what are the studies? Show me your references. And so we felt like that book didn't exist, and we set out to write it.
So what's the question that you get from most parents when they hear, oh, you've written this book? Let me ask you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really, you know, depends on the parent. I think honestly, a lot of parents just want to know if I want to raise my child plant-based. So whether that's strictly plant-based, whether that's sort of, you know, predominantly plant-based or something in between, is this going to be not only safe for my child, but is this going to be the healthiest path? Because I think that truly at the end of the day, all parents want to do what's best for their kids, right? You know, there's so many obstacles that we have in our way. Access to information is one of them. So I truly do believe that we're all doing the best we can with what we've got. But, you know, I think that parents, especially, you know, younger parents who perhaps are aware of more plant-based diets and the benefits of that, but also the impact it has on planetary health and sort of, you know, this world that we're leaving our children, I think are like, okay, I'm kind of sold for me as an adult, but what about my kids? Is this really going to be okay? You know, these are periods of growth, of, you know, such rapid change and such critical, you know, periods of importance. I think they just want to make sure that they're doing the best they can. And the answer is yes. A well-planned plant-based diet is completely adequate and safe and appropriate for all stages of the life cycle.
So I think that's super for people to hear. And we were definitely, or maybe not Adam, but I was definitely in that same situation saying, it's okay for me to screw things up for myself for a little while, right? Like I'm over 25, I've got a fully developed brain, or it's developed as much as it's gonna, right? Like, but my kids, you know, like, what about that? And I think I was telling you that I would stay up till all hours of the night being like, okay, they've had this much vitamin C and they've had this much protein and this many carbohydrates and this much fat. And I was like, is this okay? And I was making myself crazy. He finally said, like, shush, just put it away. They're fine. They're fine. You're going to know that they're fine. And it got to the point where I said to the doctor, I'm like, can we have some blood tests? And he took the blood tests and he said, put his hand on his hip when he came to give me the results. And he's like, well, Shoshana, there's something to this plant-based lifestyle of yours because your son has the best blood out of any of my patients that I've ever seen. And I'm like, okay, I could sleep at night now, right? But, you know, having this information is definitely important. And I think the questions, we didn't have to have this question because it happened a little bit later for us. But one of the biggest questions is, what about formula? What about full fat milk or soy milk or, you know, formulas if you can't exclusively breastfeed? So what kind of information do you have for parents on that level?
Yeah, let's chat about formula first, and then we can move into to milk. So really currently there are two options on the market when it comes to infant-based formulas. There's going to be a soy-based formula, or there's going to be a cow's-based formula. There are some goat-based formulas out there, but they're just not super common here in the United States, at least. So that's really sort of our two options when it comes to our kids. We do not recommend any kind of homemade formula or any kind of non-dairy milk for kids under 12 months. They're just not safe or nutritionally adequate. So if you're trying to sort of do a plant-based option, then soy-based formula is going to be the best option. But I will also caveat that by saying that we do know lots of plant-based parents or vegan parents who, for whatever reason, whether it's because that's what their baby tolerates better or that's what's a better, you know, access price point, whatever it may be, do choose cows-based formula just because, again, so many reasons, right? We've got two options out there. And then, you know, after 12 months, they switch over to a non-dairy or soy-based milk.
The important thing to know about both cow's milk and soy milk formulas is that research shows, and this is in accordance with the American Academy of Pediatrics, that kids develop and grow normally, regardless of which one. They're nutritionally equivalent. So if you are going to choose a soy formula, your babe will grow just as well as if on a cow's milk formula. I know that can be a common myth out there, is that the soy formula is either inadequate or even potentially dangerous, especially because of all the myths about soy that we hear about it affecting growth and development, about it feminizing boys. None of that is accurate. That's not what the science shows.
That's great. And that's good for people to hear, because they'll hear so much from their mothers or from their sister-in-law or their brother-in-law or what have you, but none of it is research-based. It's all...
Even your pediatrician, perhaps.
or not perhaps, or just from your pediatrician, period.
Yeah. Well, for example, when I was done breastfeeding and ready to start providing a plant milk alternative, I informed her that I would be giving him fortified unsweetened soy milk, which is what Alex and I recommend as the most nutritionally adequate milk for plant-based kids. And she said, "Oh, really? Soy for boys? I don't know. I think that's not a good idea. Can you give him pea milk instead?" And being the evidence-based dietitian I am, I said, well, there's plenty of research showing that soy is safe. If you have any research to the contrary, I'd be happy for you to share that with me. And needless to say, she did not follow up.
Well, and I'll also just sort of say too, one of we have lots and lots of research on soy. We have thousands and thousands of decades of research based on soy. But one of the things that we like to point out, especially to sort of talk about soy safety, is the fact that, these babies that are on soy-based formula, that's really the only source of nutrition for at least about 6 months or so, right? So they're having this ultra concentrated source of soy, of these isoflavones. And if we were going to see any variance when it comes to things like sexual development or, endocrine issues or thyroid health or whatever sort of the claims are out there, we would see them in these children, these babies that truly are just given only soy for, like I said, these, first 6 months, that sort of critical window of development. And we don't see that. Children who are raised on soy formula don't have any different outcomes than babies who are raised on cows-based formula. So soy is completely safe and totally fine for most babies. I will point out the only time that the American Academy of Pediatrics does not recommend soy is for babies who are preemie or those who are born with congenital hypothyroidism. Though some medication may take care of that. Those are sort of usually the two places where we say that a different formula might be a better option.
Soy formula, but later in life they can have soy products.
Yes.
So how should new parents that are encountering these family members or doctors that seem to know better than they do when they make these decisions, how should they be responding? What should they be looking for, or where can they get the research to provide? What would the response be?
We always say fight fear with facts. So educate yourself. Get this book. We actually we get asked this so often that I don't know if it's a post on our website or it may be an email exclusive, but we have an entire list of common questions, concerns, and comments that people get from well-meaning family members or even from their pediatricians about plant-based diets and what to say in response. And we cover all of those in the book as well. But the most powerful thing you can do is to show that you know what you're talking about, that you've made an educated decision and share it with them. Or you can just brush them off if you don't care. and we're good.
And I think go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I do think that all of those questions and concerns, whether it's from family members or, they are sort of rooted in ideally the question sort of that's being asked in a overt way is like, are you sure this is healthy, right? Are you sure this is safe? It's all sort of based in, they want to make sure that what you're doing is best for your child. And like Whitney said, if you can say, look, I've done my homework. I know what I'm doing. Here's sort of the research. I think that's really reassuring. And I'll also say, we get how intimidating it is, especially when you're with someone like a pediatrician who sort of has this expertise. I even find myself sometimes when I'm in the pediatrician's office and they question things, it's hard to sort of say, well, hold on, here's this study, or have you thought about this? I mean, that does take a lot of, expertise and experience to sort of have that confrontation when we feel like these people who are so trusted, who give us guidance on so many things when it comes to raising our kids, are questioning our diet. So I completely have so much empathy for the parent out there who's like, oh, but my pediatrician said. But, we like to always say that pediatricians are experts in a lot of things. Many of them do not have much nutrition training at all. If they do, it's very little, and it's usually not based in plant-based nutrition. And so our book really tries to sort of help fill those gaps, so you do feel empowered and confident as a parent.
So maybe they should take a copy of your book in their diaper bag and bring it with them. Bring it with them to the appointment and leave it with them for a week and then pick it back up. But yes. What I wanted to say to people, and I'm always finding the easiest way to make the biggest impact. And what I would say is, don't feel like you need to memorize all of that research that you've done. Don't feel like you need to regurgitate it all on the spot, because they'll just, a lot of people will regurgitate nothing back to you that sounds like something. So keep an email that you could cut and paste and be like, I'll just send it off to you. Right. And they'll never open the email. Advice. Right. Yeah. They'll never open the email, but don't yet, because people get so nervous. Like, I don't speak doctor. I don't speak medical. Right. You don't have to memorize all of those things. Do the research, feel confident with it, and send them a link to the book, or send them links to PubMed or wherever you've looked for it, and just use that.
Well, and it's like anything else. You don't owe anyone any explanation, right? As long as you feel confident in what you're doing, it's okay. Trust me. I love my mother-in-law, but her and I have many disagreements about how I raise children, and that's okay. I accept her opinion and others' opinions too, but doesn't mean I have to necessarily change what I'm doing when it comes to raising my children.
Fair. For sure. For sure. And then my other question is, going back to what we were talking about before. So why would you suggest the soy over the pea protein? I think people might still be thinking about that inside their heads.
Yeah, we don't necessarily say one's better than the other. Soy's a little bit easier to find. I think there may only be one or two brands that actually have that fortified unsweetened pea milk, whereas soy milk, I think you can find at a lower price point. So mainly for accessibility, but either one is going to be a good nutritionally adequate option as a replacement for cow's milk.
Yeah, the other nice thing about soy over pea is just that it also is a good source of choline, which is important for cognitive development, and it can be more limiting in plant-based foods. Soy tends to be one of the best sources of it, and so if you're offering soy milk, 1-2 times a day, you're just going to help to meet those choline needs.
Great. So that's important for people to know too. Good. So now they've got that. What other kind of misconceptions do you hear coming from people that you'd like to kind of have people understand a little bit more about?
Yeah, I think one of the other big ones is iron. So, we, especially in the baby-led weaning community, there's sort of this really big emphasis on the idea that, it's hard to get enough iron on a plant-rich diet or a plant-based diet, and therefore you have to incorporate meat. I will tell you, I remember reading all of these baby-led weaning books before I had my son. I was like, oh, I love this concept. This sounds so great. This is kind of what I want to do. And I was so mad because every single book out there said, this like big asterisk, if you wanted to be vegetarian, like, be cautious if you're not going to serve your child beef or other kinds of red meat, it's really, really dangerous. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I remember texting Whitney so many like photos, like, can you believe these books say this? Because it's just not the case, right? So yes, of course, meat contains iron, but so do plant foods, right? We're talking about needing about 11 milligrams of iron when it comes to that sort of 7 months to 12 months of age, which is a lot of iron, right? We're talking about adult men need about 8 milligrams of iron per day. And, with this 11 milligram amount for these young children, young appetites, young bellies. That can be a really hard number to meet, but that's true regardless of diet, right? You'd also have to serve your baby 14 ounces of red meat a day to get that through beef, enough iron, and no one's doing that, right? That's crazy. So we sort of say that iron deficiency anemia is the most common deficiency when it comes to all kids. Yes, it's important. We don't want to sweep that under the rug. But the two big things that we like to educate parents on is the fact that non-heme iron, the one that's found in plants, is less bioavailable, but the best way to increase absorption is to pair it with a source of vitamin C, and that increases absorption by about 4 to 6 times. So that really helps to combat that amount. Beans actually have more iron per ounce than beef does, but again, it's in that non-heme form. So as long as you're serving these foods often and with a source of vitamin C, you're really going to help to meet those higher needs, especially in sort of that early, later infancy period.
So maybe people are wondering if they need to pour lemon juice all over the food, or if just maybe a small handful of spinach, the vitamin C in that would do good.
Yeah, that's a good option. You have to think of some ways to get that spinach in that baby will eat. We have like a caterpillar pasta in the book where we use greens as the base of the sauce. We finely dice spinach and kale and add them to like our baby led weenie muffins or other recipes. So yes, it doesn't have to be specifically citrus. There's tons of other fruits and vegetables that are really good sources of vitamin C that you can pair with those iron-rich foods. One more thing we want to point out is we think iron-fortified baby cereal gets a really bad rap, regardless of the diet we're talking about. And it really shouldn't, because as Alex said before, babies have such high iron needs in this period from 6 to 12 months, and they have a very small appetite, a very low intake. So really, in order to meet these excessively high amounts of iron, almost all diets should really include some fortified iron products. So as long as you're picking the best source, because there are some baby cereals out there that are maybe rice-based, so we've got a little bit of a concern with heavy metals like arsenic in there, or other ones that may have different sweeteners or additives. We want to shy away from those. But if you're picking something that's simply ground up oats and some fortified iron, that's an excellent nutritious option and an easy way to get some iron in the diet. And there's no reason that parents should be afraid of those. But unfortunately they are, because a lot of people think that they're processed or have some misconstrued ideas about them.
So earlier in the conversation, Shush mentioned that she used to count macros and micros and try to figure out how much of this and that, these nutrients that the kids really needed. How important is it? Is it more important to do as a parent of a plant-based lifestyle kid than it is a regular lifestyle? Or I shouldn't even call it a regular lifestyle, because it's not regular. I don't
Non-plant-based.
Non-plant-based.
Yeah, the standard Western
how
diet.
The average person is not going to be doing that, not going to be counting. So how important is it, and how much should we be worrying about that when we're talking about a plant-based lifestyle?
Yeah, we really don't recommend having to track that, just because, as you likely know, it's really easy to get sort of like lost in the details, and it can be really hard to sort of see the big picture, right? So we like to say nutrition is a long game. We're talking about iron, and yeah, iron is a nutrient of importance, right? That's true for all children. And we do want to make sure that our kids are getting enough. It's some of the reasons that in our book we have various like plate models and tools to help parents feel like, okay, as long as I'm sort of serving these foods often, I'm likely going to meet a lot of those micro and macro needs. As long as your child is growing appropriately, growing according to their growth chart, that's really one of the best measures that we have, that they're sort of getting all of the macronutrients that they need for growth. The one thing I will say that we like to educate a lot of plant-based parents around is the fact that kids' fat needs are much higher than adults. So older infants, younger toddlers need about 30 to 40% of their calories from fat. But even when we're talking about, kids as they get into, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, they still need, 25-35% of their calories from fat. That can be a little bit more, perhaps like a re-education on some parents in the plant-based community who are really sort of trying to eat more low fat or really taking out some of those added fats in the diet. And we don't want to do that when it comes to kids. Fat is so critical for growth, right? For essential calories, for brain development, for sort of all of these things that we need to make sure we're having enough fats in. So we try to educate parents around things like, yes, cooking in plant oils, adding in nuts and seeds where appropriate, and not choking hazards, adding in avocado, sort of other emphasizing more of that macronutrient. But for the most part, no, we don't recommend sort of strict counting, just because it's really what happens most often that matters the most. And, day-to-day variances are going to vary a lot, right? There's some days my kids are amazing and I'm like, oh man, that was an awesome day. I know we got a lot of things in. And there's other days where I'm like, well, they ate 4 strawberries for dinner tonight and that's just what they decided to eat. So, if I was kind of stuck into that day-to-day, that can get really tricky and confusing. But if I sort of step back and say, what happened this week? What happened this month? That's a much better picture. And that's true, again, for all kids.
If you have an extreme picky eater, or your child is like failing to thrive or not following their growth chart, that might be a time when assessing their actual nutrient intake for a couple days would be a good idea to get a picture of maybe what they're missing out on. Probably be better to go see a professional who can do that for you versus, again, obsessing on the details. But for the average child, simply following the plate model, following the overall guidelines will help you to meet their nutrient needs without just getting too deep into the nitty gritty.
So tell us a little bit about your 3B3 plate model.
Yeah, so the PB3 plate model, it's...
Oops, sorry, 3B3.
No,
what is it, PB3?
It's the PB3 plate, okay. And that stands for plant-based 3. So it's really, the 3 are the 3 main categories. And this is, again, a visual guide that we developed to help parents with meal planning. You've got your legumes, nuts, and seeds, you've got your grains and starches, and you've got your fruits and vegetables. And so those are the 3 main categories. And we like to do food groups versus macronutrient groups, because when we're talking about a plant-based diet, all plant-based foods are a mix of the macronutrients. Any whole plant food is actually going to have all 3 in varying amounts. So it wouldn't really be accurate to say this is the protein and this is the fat and this is the carbohydrates, although some groups obviously have more than others. We do put fat at the center of the plate, so that is the one macronutrient that we call out, just for all the reasons that Alex just listed off. But the idea is that if you get something from each of those 3 main categories on each plate, as often as you can, we leave some room for error. But if you get all 3 of those on there, you're going to be meeting the majority of your kids' both macro and micronutrient needs. So within the 3 categories, we also point out certain nutrients of importance. So we've got iron, which is at the center of the plate, again, to put that focus on how important the iron is and to show that it's found in all 3 of the main groups. Then we highlight calcium in some areas and omega-3 fatty acids and your carotene queens, which are plant-based sources of vitamin A. And that's the whole idea, is that it takes the guesswork out. So Alex and I both have these hanging on our refrigerator. You go to the fridge, you have nothing planned for dinner. Like, I got to get a meal on the table and I want it to be nutritionally adequate. What do I have? Okay, I got a slab of tofu. We can do something with that. And you kind of look at the plate and you go, where does that fall? Well, that falls in the legumes, nuts, and seeds. What are the 2 other categories that I need to meet? And you can kind of just plan the meal from there. So even as the person who created this, I find that looking at the plate model just reassures me that I'm getting the things my kid needs and at as many meals as possible.
Especially when you're up all night with a baby who's been teething and, the other one, like, all he wants to do is chase the ball, right? Like, we're tired as mamas sometimes, as plant-based and as well as we eat, there's room for tiredness too. So it's great to have that as a model to follow.
Absolutely.
So the book is Plant-Based Baby and Toddler. Why don't you tell us where people can get it and how people can connect with you?
Yeah, so it's available at all major retailers. If you're listening to this outside the United States, the best place to check it out is Book Depository. I think it's also on Amazon and in some countries, but that can be sort of hit or miss. So check out Book Depository for international shipping. And you can connect with us over on our Instagram, is really where we're the most active when it comes to social media, at Plant-Based Juniors, and then also over at our blog, plantbasedjuniors.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We're so happy that you were able to share some of your personal stories today, that you're able to share your expertise with us. We know that people have for sure learned a lot, and really getting through some of those misconceptions and giving people the confidence to say, okay, I'm plant-based. It's okay for my children or my grandchildren to be plant-based too, and we don't have to wait until it's too late.
Cool.
Exactly.
Thank
Right from
you.
the start.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Thanks, Whitney.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you guys
Thank
Thank
being
you guys.
here.
It was so nice chatting with you.